So, we had some really interesting news this week regarding the race between Tim Canova and the infamously corrupt Debbie Wassermann Schultz. So, as Alex Doherty of the Miami Herald reports, Tim Canova, a liberal Nova Southeastern University law professor who raised millions in an unsuccessful Democratic primary against Debbie Wassermann Schultz in 2016, announced Monday that he will drop out of the Democratic primary for Wasserman Schultz's Broward-based district and instead run as an independent. Even as independents, we are the real Democrats in this race, Canova said at a press conference outside Broward County Election Supervisor Brenda Snipes' office. Even as we run as independents, I will run as a better Democrat. I did not leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left us. Yeah, so this is incredibly interesting news. I couldn't help but have a gigantic goofy smile on my face when I read this article just because this is a huge middle finger that he's throwing up to Debbie Wassermann Schultz after she not only rigged the 2016 primary against Bernie Sanders, but rigged her own primary against Tim Canova in 2016. Now, you do have to understand and be realistic about this. When you run as an independent, it is a lot more difficult. It's not impossible to get elected. It's improbable, though. It's why we see so few independents in Congress. Bernie Sanders is one, Angus King is another. It's really uncommon because voters at the ballot box typically tend to support the two-party system because, one, they're afraid that if they cast their vote for anyone besides a Republican or Democrat, that's a wasted vote and it won't matter. And also, a lot of individuals love the idea of participating on a team, which is why they either vote for Republicans or Democrats. And there are some benefits entailed with running for a particular party, both Democrat and Republican. That includes guaranteed ballot access, voter data tools like NGP Van, additional funding. And that's why so many progressives across the country choose to begrudgingly run as Democrats. It's because there are a lot of benefits entailed with party membership, but at the same time, with all of those pros comes a lot of cons. I mean, by running as a Democrat, you end up legitimizing a corrupt party. You have to play by their rules. So, for example, the DCCC, they often say that, if you want any money from them, you have to spend it in a certain way. If you want their support, you have to spend it on television advertisements, when in 2018, that might not be the most effective way to run a campaign. Additionally, if you don't play by their rules, they can shut you out of the process, or they can just shut you out for no reason at all. It's why we see a lot of progressives lose their access to NGP Van. It's why Debbie Wassermann Schultz cut off Tim Canova's access to NGP Van in 2016. But putting all of that aside, looking at this individual case, do I support Tim Canova's decision to run as an independent? Absolutely. I 100% support this decision because Debbie Wassermann Schultz already showed that she's willing to play dirty. She used her power as DNC chair in 2016 to block him from accessing NGP Van. The Broward County's office, they're ignoring evidence of election fraud, destroyed ballots. They're refusing to look into that. Now, I'm not saying that, this was directly Debbie Wassermann Schultz, who's culpable here, although she's been known to rig elections, so maybe I am saying that. But certainly, they're not willing to give Tim Canova a fair shot in this Democratic Party primary. So what do you do if the Democratic Party is unwilling to play fair? You get dirty too. You play dirty. Now, what did Donald Trump do when the RNC was signaling that they might try to stack the deck against him in 2015? He threatened to run as an independent. And this scared them shitless. Why? Because what happens if you're a Republican who's prominent with a lot of name recognition and you run against the Republican Party's nominee? You split the votes and you allow a Democrat to win. Now, this is what Bernie Sanders should have done. Even if he wasn't actually going to run as an independent, he should have at least bluffed. Because in bluffing, at least, you get power. You tell the party, if you play dirty, I'm going to play dirty too. And by your unwillingness to play fair, you're going to ruin it for all of us because I'm going to run as an independent, split the vote, and hand the election to a Republican. That's kind of what Tim Canova is doing here. Now, it's not guaranteed that he's going to hand the election to a Republican, so I don't necessarily want to frame this as vote splitting, even though that does tend to happen once in a while. But if he wants to win, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him. What I do want to see progressives do across the country is if the Democratic Party, if their state Democratic Party is going to play dirty, they need to play dirty too. They need to make these types of threats, threaten to run as an independent. And for someone like Tim Canova with a lot of name recognition among the progressive community to do this, it shows the Democratic Party establishment that we're not playing games. If you're not going to play fair and allow us to run within your party under the Democratic Party's umbrella, then guess what? We're going to run as independents, and we're going to take more votes away from you. And you can't blame us if the Democrat ultimately goes on to lose because we ran as an independent, because we tried to be fair, we tried to run under your party and the Democratic Party's umbrella, but you don't want us. So what else do we have to do? There's no choice left for us. So look, at the end of the day, if the establishment is going to play dirty, then it's time we do too. Progressives are done playing your game. We're done. If you're not going to allow us to run and win in fair races, then we're not going to support the Democratic Party any longer. And look, it's not like we're even asking them to stack the deck in favor of progressives. All we're asking is for fair fights. If we lose fair and square to establishment Democrats, then we lose fair and square. We'll accept the results, but we're not losing fair and square. The Democratic Party establishment, the DNC, the DCCC, they're stacking the deck against progressives across the country. Now look, if it's the case in this situation, because I've already seen some complaints lobbed against Tim Canova that, oh, you're going to spoil this election and Debbie Wassermann Schultz is going to lose and it's going to open the door to a Republican winning. If we lose Debbie Wassermann Schultz to a Republican, oops, who cares? She sides with Republicans a lot of the time anyway. She's corrupt. She should have resigned in shame to begin with. So if Debbie Wassermann Schultz loses because Tim Canova, quote, spoils this election, then, you know what? That's the Democratic Party's own fault for shutting out progressives. And maybe they should learn from this that they shouldn't shut out progressives from the process. They shouldn't. If you run fair primaries and you give progressives a fair chance and you don't tip the scales against us, then we wouldn't have to do this. So I'm not saying that this is something that progressives should do in every district, but certainly in this district with a congresswoman as corrupt as Debbie Wassermann Schultz, do it. Run as an independent, and if she loses, she loses. Who cares? It's Debbie Wassermann Schultz. It's not that big of a loss.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.